Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Forensic Focus podcast. We have back with us Heather Malik. Sorry, Heather Barnhart.
It's okay. It happens.
Um, who we have spoken to relatively recently and on previous occasions. And for the first time ever, we have Paul Lorenz with us as well, both from Cellebrite, and we're going to talk about whatever comes into our tiny little minds today, or at least my tiny little mind. These are big brain thinkers over at Cellebrite. But we're going to start off, Paul, as you haven't been on before, and this is your very first time. Do you want to do a brief intro of yourself and your background and how you got into this crazy, fun, joyous world we call forensics?
Fantastic. Thank you for having me on. It's a privilege and an honor. I know you have a big reach, so it's fun to kind of speak to people as well. So where do I start? So I'm based in Ottawa, Canada. I started off law enforcement, so I spent close to 15 years in law enforcement in Canada across two different agencies, and then left or finally with Ottawa Police Service. Started on patrol, like most people, went through various parts: patrol, traffic, some plainclothes stuff, high risk offender management, child exploitation investigations, and then I took on a temporary assignment in tech. I had interest in tech. I broke computers when I was younger, and they're like, "Hey, you'll fit right in." And sure enough, I kind of came into the section and took an interest in mobile forensics. Had some very big files. Worked with Cellebrite and pretty much all the tools that were out there. So we were very fortunate. I think how Heather called it before, we were a rich lab. We had many different tool sets at our disposal. The unfortunate part too is like primarily doing child exploitation cases, which of course that has its toll and everything else. One day out of the blue, met with one of the guys from Cellebrite, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to come over to Cellebrite?" And then that's kind of how my journey started. Had no real intentions leaving policing, law enforcement. I absolutely loved it. And in Cellebrite, my journey has been a wild one as well. Started with pre-sales, ran the CAS Advanced Services Lab in Canada, moved over to product. Now a part of so the head of customer engagement. So a lot of the forward facing. I have some very very smart minds that work with me, like Heather, Ronan, JP, and we're going to have expanding out. But try to be that voice of the customer. Try to be that thought leadership piece to be able to kind of bridge that gap of what customers need, what the industry needs, and kind of bring that back to our products, and hopefully kind of back and forth providing support, providing that digital face to people to talk to people on Discord, and kind of have that, essentially try to be that person that I didn't have when I was working in forensics, right? It feels like you're always alone where there's thousands of people across the world that are doing the same thing. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what it is. It's a big community, and we're trying to help bridge some of those gaps.
That was such a positive spin. I like it.
I can say it's a beautiful segue into what we were talking about very briefly before we started, which is you've just put out the Industry Trends Survey, which obviously is a huge part of customer engagement, is going out and finding out what people are actually doing and what they want. And as a business, obviously, if you're delivering on that or not, it's kind of important because it's whether they stay with you or go to Magnet. You know, it's one of those things, isn't it? So, I mean, what of interest came out of that? What jumped out of that for you as the key salient points that are worth bringing up?
It was all over the place. So everything from how do you identify what's your persona? Are you an investigator, an analyst, head of lab, a prosecutor, examiner? Issues, the biggest issues we found, obviously locked devices, locked iPhone was the biggest. Encrypted applications. We asked about cloud versus USB storage. So, like, the old days, I say old, people still do this of here's my data. Sigh, have it. Good luck. Sign this chain of custody. And even AI and what people think of AI. Is it useful? How could it be used in digital forensics? What did I miss, Paul?
And it's surprisingly, and it was like a large subset of views. So it's not like the survey hit over 2,000 people. It was a lot of people that responded, which is great because it kind of gives a better baseline rather than, 20 or 30 or 100 people. And kind of backlogs, again, all the stuff that we talk about, right? The backlogs, the trends of how do you deal with all this data? The fact that tools are getting easier to get more data out of devices, but what do you do with it? How do you review it? Printing to PDF, a 400,000 page document. Like, what do you do? Like, it's scary, but it's it's kind of a reality for some, right? And then how do you effectively, what do you do with it? Like, how do you, uh, I still remember days from my old days of having multiple Excel documents on my screen and kind of
Yep.
going, okay, which one matches? Do we have a link between this? And it's like mind blowing. It's like, and there's still agencies doing this, right? And I mean, I think this is kind of where we're loading this. Like, there's so much data coming out that it's just, you know, the downsides of having full access and full file system extraction is like you're overloaded with work.
Yeah.
And it's nice when we do these surveys. So what Paul and I did, we had 110 slides of results, trimmed it down to 23, and then talk about it. But when I brought up Skopje, Macedonia, there's things that it just spurs your memory when we're having questions coming in. I'm like, I wanted that to be blocked out of my mind forever, like that experience.
Mm,
But it's
mm.
old casework and old things that come up that you see people still doing. When I was in Skopje, I was, oh my gosh, 27 years old, 28 years old. It was 2 years ago, Sai.
Yeah, I mean,
It was a long time ago. But it's crazy how you see people asking questions and saying things. I'm like, "Ooh, how do people we don't share it good enough on experience and how to progress beyond." So I think some people still just struggle on catching up.
it's an interesting one actually, and it's a conversation that we've been having in the UK for a little while about provision of mental health care. Is that we're not very good as a across an industry.
Mhm.
We have our little silos, so there's prosecution or there's defense, and we have, perhaps one law enforcement agency versus another, and they're not necessarily talking and sharing.
Yeah.
Um, and we need to get better because at the end of the day, we're all actually trying to do the same thing. But everybody it seems to me to be getting better. Do you think it's getting better?
I say the growth of the online communities is starting to bridge some of that stuff. I mean, like even 5, 6 years ago, like I'll use the Discord channel as an example because I kind of
Yeah.
live in there daily as well. And I mean, people can easily share stuff. So that avenues of sharing information, sharing details and talks and all different challenges that they have um, is easier. But I think also at the same time is that the complexity of these investigations isn't going away, right? Whether it's encrypted applications, encrypted devices, or hardened devices, all this stuff kind of is just as hard, if not harder now, because
Yeah.
people expect this. So working together is like super important, and also factoring that legal justifications and legal challenges are completely different from one side to the other. That what I experience in Canada, we have these very strict timelines of prosecuting a case, don't apply to the states, don't apply to the U.S.
I've
So
been working a case for years. I'm still waiting.
well,
Well, I'm going to say it's fascinating because I mean, I don't think there's a statute of limitations in the UK. I know you guys. I'd say that I don't know. I mean, I'm prosecuting cases that are 10 years old, so it's just because they finally come around. I don't know if they ever run out. But I understand that there are statutes of limitations in the US and Canada definitely.
but even puts pressure on the investigations. I'll give you an example. It's a Jordan decision, right? So essentially, it means that a certain depending on the complexity of investigations, you either have from the time you put handcuffs on someone or charge someone to
Mm,
to concluding a case is 18 or 36 months. So if you
Jeez.
kind of think about it, that's a lot to put onto an investigator. And
mm,
I'm taking a step outside of the forensics piece, right? I mean, just everything else, whether it's warrants and everything else, you add a lot of pressure to it, and then you factor in all the other challenges on top of the forensics piece. Like, I mean, you could be trying to get into a device for so long, and then what if you get the device, and then how do you
mm,
examine this, and how do you share it? So, I mean, there's a lot of challenges, and I'll say that. Um, Being mindful to the different ones across the world, like I think in the end, it's still there's very similar challenges, right? It comes down to people not having enough time. Your backlogs are getting bigger. You're getting more cases. You're getting more data.
mm,
One of the points, Heather, it was the reliance on DNA was going down, but the
Yeah.
reliance of digital evidence was going up. And I'm like, in the end, it kind of makes sense too, right? And that's one of the survey results is that we're seeing more digital evidence going in than DNA. Everyone's
Yeah,
got
and
a
what
phone.
was I actually remember one stat, I can't believe it. 9 out of 10 who took the survey, so of these 2,100 people, 9 out of 10 said that digital evidence helped close a case in court through prosecution.
prior to going to trial, right? I think,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yeah.
bringing things to court quicker, making all that part will help from the survey results was getting cases resolved prior to even going to trial. So kind of that rush and everything else is you get that evidence ahead of time. It's going to save time for the investigators, save time for the victim having to testify. All these kind of really fundamental pieces that if we can help chip away at even the court backlog. I'm not sure how it is in the UK, but I mean, post COVID, it's been a total mess here. So
Yeah, it's horrific here. I mean, and the idea of having to complete a case in 36 months, I think would have most prosecutors here sobbing in a corner. Because it's just not going to be feasible. I I've got a case that came in the other day, and I was told that not only is it backdated to whenever it was, but they're not going to pay the current rates. They're only going to pay the old rates because it was contracted back then, not now. And I'm like, oh, come on, that's not fair. So yeah, it's not good.
That's wild.
There's that one stat, I think, Heather, you're the one that mentioned it yesterday. The 7% of people or 7% of devices don't even get examined.
Yeah, just ignore it because they're locked. 7%. So imagine if you're accused of a crime, Cy, and I'm like, I can't get into it, so I'm not going to look. But that's what would prove your innocence. Isn't that
Yeah.
wild?
Yeah, I mean that's I can say we're very good in as human beings in rounding things up and rounding things down, but that's 1 in 10. 7% is nearly 10%. Is practically 1 in
Yes.
10 devices, and that's not a risk you'd really want to be taking.
Okay.
I mean, I remember somebody told me about a case. It was years and years ago, but essentially they raided a guy who repaired computers for a living, and there were so he had stacks and stacks of machines. And they they didn't know how to process it, so they made a random selection from them and processed a couple.
They need to look
They
right in
pulled.
the registry and see which ones belong to him.
Well, it didn't matter. They pulled
Quick
it.
live
They
view.
processed it. They found CSAM on there. But it wasn't his. It was a random lucky guess on one of those devices for somebody else who had sent it in for repair.
Holy cow.
You're like, if you had processed everything, then you would have gotten that without a shadow of a doubt. The guy was innocent; he hadn't actually done anything, and he was, complete. He was acquitted, but the ongoing prosecution resulted in that. But that was like a random selection from a stack
That's
because that was the
crazy.
only way it could be processed.
And the bravery of the person that put that computer in for repair. I guess they really needed that nastiness back in their life. Worth the risk.
Well, I
That's
think,
crazy.
yeah. Somebody was told that something encrypted and it didn't clearly.
That's my official
So
term, the nastiness.
the nastiness. I think we should roll that out across the industry.
Mm-hmm.
It should be a sticker. But I did a lot of cases from submissions to repair shops. Like, you're like, what are you guys doing? Like, this is not.
Yeah.
I mean, but it kind of segues into the other part of all these extractions that we're doing from devices. I think one of the stats was 25% only hold no valuable data, right? So out of all these extractions that people are doing, that 25% of
Waste
devices,
time then. Yeah.
waste time. So if you think about access, whether it's brute force or brute force, and then extract and then analyze, how many hours are you wasting because you didn't triage or take a look at it ahead of time and say, hey, is this even kind of worth looking at?
Well, look at the Boston Marathon. The guy that was caught, what was his name? Like Zharniev, or he has a hard name. The younger brother that was caught on the boat. When he was caught, he had a backpack full of random phones from a pawn shop. The amount of confusion that caused. I remember people saying, "Help us make sense of this. What is this stuff?" Like, what evil? I was gonna say a cuss word. I won't say it. But seriously, like, what in the heck is
This
wrong with people?
isn't a PG rated
Yeah, I was gonna
podcast.
say
So you
evil
feel free.
fuckery. Like, who goes to a pawn shop and thinks I'm gonna get a whole bunch of phones and put in this backpack just in case I get caught by the feds and it's gonna mess with everyone? Because it made no sense. The data was completely nonsensical. It was just like 20 random phones in a backpack. Why?
Yeah. That's Yeah.
Unless they were planning to make little
Anti-forensic
bombs
through
out of those.
obfuscation.
That's what I was also wondering, if they were gonna use those, like, to
A
detonate.
long-term strategy for detonators? Could be. Could be. And you definitely want somebody else's old phone,
Yep.
not one you'd bought brand. Well, I mean,
Yeah, and
apart from
these
the
weren't
cost of
nice
the phone.
phones. They reminded me a lot of what I was seeing in Afghanistan and stuff back then in the work I was doing.
Ah,
So I'm like, this is
yeah,
kind of Hurt Locker style. Like, gonna get a
yeah,
call on
yeah,
this Nokia and everything's gonna blow up.
yeah.
But that's also
Except
where
that
my nasty mind was back then.
Well, this is the thing is we're all we're, we're all a little bit devious, aren't we? Let's be honest. I mean, we've come into this industry, uh, quite a lot of us from a background of, well, I came from security, so I was very used to trying to break into things rather than people, so I love getting my computer misuse acts and the hacking cases, because it's like,
Hmm.
oh, I wouldn't have done that, but yeah, no, that's not bad, that's kind of cool, I quite rate that. So yeah, but after a little while you're like, oh, that's a really cool idea, and occasionally I think I'm in the wrong industry. There's been a couple of cases, especially the drugs cases. It's terrible to say, but especially the drugs cases where you're watching these guys. They got caught, so they're not that good at it. But they're there with their, sitting on top of their Ferrari with the bags of money and the bags of cocaine, and you're like, yeah, I'm driving my old Ford Focus, and this is not really getting me very far.
This is true. This is true.
But I guess I sleep at night, so this, that, and the other. Oh dear. So anyway, your survey, it's 2,100 people, 2,100 people, you said, and this is global. This is across the world.
95 countries responded.
95. Wow, that actually must be pretty much every country that you're actually legally allowed to sell it in, I would have thought.
probably.
That's a good point.
Yeah, export. Yes, when you get higher than that, you have to start worrying about
Mhm.
whether export restrictions are working or not.
Yeah, that part has a lot of oversight at this point where it
Yeah.
goes. Even because we ran a poll during the webinar yesterday and asked about AI, what's your thought on AI? You have two different camps, people, well, what do you consider AI? Which component is it? And kind of just what's your view on AI and digital investigations? And 26%, and this is from yesterday's poll for everyone that attended yesterday
Yeah.
live, 26% full, let's go. I'm like,
Where are you, Paul? Where do you fall into this camp?
I'm cautious but open to it. I like the idea. I like the idea of augmenting some of the stuff that we're doing, the mundane tasks. But I mean, you're not going to summarize. There's no find my evidence button. There's
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
There's no, hey, where all the kind of key critical pieces, because there's still an investigative mind, the intuitive mind. You still need a pair of human eyes to oversee this. Hopefully, it brings you to something quicker. Fantastic. But it's still, you can't. What I'm worried about is, someone presses that button and goes poof off to court, and you're like,
Yeah.
that's a poor forensic examiner going, WTF am I doing with this, or what does this mean? Oh, there's been no validation. So there's a lot of room to help improve the stuff that we are doing, whether it's automating some of the tasks or surfacing stuff that's, hey, these are pictures that are AI generated or that have been modified, something that you can look at that makes sense. But there's still, no matter what, still needs to be a pair of human eyes to go over something, validate it, verify before you're saying, hey, this is kind of what this is, and not just totally trusting the tool for it.
Yeah. I also worry outside of forensics that it's just going to make people stupid. Like, everyone relies so much on it to write anything, to do anything. I used it a little bit yesterday to help me write an email because I thought it was going to be nasty and I needed it to make me sound nicer. But
Did it work?
yes, I think so. I haven't gotten a response yet.
I find mine make me sound if I try and do that sort of thing, it just makes me sound horribly sarcastic. So maybe it's not one for me.
So
I used it, and it's very interesting. I went to a talk probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago now, and it was an American crash investigator, an accident investigator, who had been testing AI to see if it could solve traffic collision problems.
Mhm.
Okay, so it was very simple stuff like, I'm traveling at 45 miles an hour along a road, the coefficient of friction is this, how long will it take me to stop, kind of stuff. Okay. And when he started doing this investigation, it came out with some really, really plausible sounding things that were completely wrong. because what it had done is it had gone out to the internet and it had scraped it and it had gone probabilistically. These are the sort of things that sound like good answers to this kind of question, and it sort of assembled the bits together to give an output that was, it sounded good but had no relevance to the actual figures used. And then he pointed out that there's now a calculate button or a think button in a lot of the AIs there. And when he pressed that, it actually started to take a lot longer to come up with a response, 2-3 minutes at a time. But it then actually went and did the maths on it. And I was playing with this the other day, and it was a very, very silly example. But it came up in a family conversation at some point where there was a sequence of numbers, and there was a challenge to write a poem with words of that length. Okay, so it was like 1, 3, 5, 2, 7, 9, 1, whatever. And it was like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't make it. It was 20 odd numbers. There was no way on earth I could do this. And then I plugged it into ChatGPT and I said, go ahead, go do this. And it went away and it came back with a poem that, and it promptly counted the numbers of words and it said, right, and now here's a 5-letter word, the. And I was like, you haven't quite grasped this, have you? But when I hit the calculate button, it went away and it took it 5 minutes to come up with something. But it actually came up with, okay, I'm not going to call it good poetry because, I mean, first of all, I wouldn't know good poetry if it came up and bit me on the bum. But second of all, it wasn't great. But it did get the word numbers right.
The job.
It did make sense and it did the job. And you're like, okay, well, maybe there's a bit more to this than I originally gave it credit for. But you have to have the calculate button ticks, otherwise it doesn't work.
Which app were you using?
That was ChatGPT.
I'm going to see if I have the calculate button. I'm going to look at it right now.
It was like, Heather, I think the example that you used yesterday, which kind of resonates, right? Like, if someone tried to go through 6 years of chats between me and you,
Yes.
That's a lot of work, right? I mean, I think that's where that kind of stuff can help you kind of give an insight a little bit to say, hey, they've known each other. This is kind of the stuff they usually send each other ridiculous videos or TikToks or reels. But I mean, how else are you going to quickly go through 6 years of conversations? I mean, reality of it, you'll still have to scroll through some of that stuff, but if you can get a snapshot of some of that stuff and then verify afterwards, because how else do you go through that? I mean, thousands and thousands of messages.
Yeah. I think the thing is I think AI is a fantastic investigation tool. It's not a forensic tool, it's an investigation tool. And we need to make that distinction very clear to people. But actually, it's funny, the bit that scares me is the false negatives. Like those laptops. It's like, if the AI comes back and goes, we've sort of gone through it, we've got a probability thinking that, it's 90% likely to be there's nothing of interest in here. We're back to that 1 in 10 that actually there is something of interest that just the AI hasn't picked it up. And I mean, probabilities in AI are a nightmare anyway, because it's hard. But it's also things like we have the concept of nuance, and if we're talking to two people, we have our own. Especially if you've known each other a long time, you have your own language, you have your own internal references. That even the best AI is never going to get those in jokes because your husband doesn't get those in jokes. It's not. So there's no hope for.
They may think we're psychopaths. You're like, do not talk to these people. They are not good.
AI recommendation: just don't touch this. Yeah.
Stay far away. Save yourself.
Yeah. But it's wild to think that if you that 1 in 10, what if your 1 in 10 is wrong, right? And then that's kind of the scary part of. I remember even doing the investigations years ago. It's like you're more worried about the person that's wrongfully convicted than all the 100 other. It's that one, right? And that's.
But speaking of people wrongfully convicted, sorry, I just cut you off.
No, that's okay.
Lately, I feel like a lot of the cases coming my way, I'm told a narrative, and the people ask me for help expect me to say, yes, that is exactly what happened. And they're not happy when
when you send back something that isn't
all I can think about, too, on this one specific case is if they didn't ask me to look at it, there's a good chance a jury would have found this woman guilty of killing her kids. But the data doesn't, they need something else. They can't say based upon what the digital evidence shows that that's the truth.
I do a lot of work that similarly that it's there are assertions being made that aren't necessarily supported by the evidence that's there. I think that it's very interesting because I've done a lot of video analysis courses recently with Lever. And one of the things they're very clear on is about cognitive bias and bias in general.
Yeah.
And when examining a video, they ask you to try and avoid being told what it is that you're looking for or the conclusions that you're being made, so that your examination is what you see, what you find, not what you are predisposed to find because somebody has told you that in advance. And I think that's a very interesting one, is that, you know, for case review, perhaps we should just be being given blank or not blank images, you know what I mean, given the images without any context.
Yes.
And said, okay, here you go, tell me what you find.
Yep.
And tell me what's of interest to you and what the problem, you know, and at that point maybe we're into a way of getting a fairer representation of it.
But I think you need at least a little clue on what you're looking at, otherwise the hunt's going to take forever.
Well, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because where do you allow that? How far do you allow that cognitive bias to go? And you know, I mean, it's easier when you're doing the case review, because at that point you've got a great deal of evidence that's been put together into this storyline that you're looking at, and you're looking for the holes in it, technically, I guess.
But even something simple, instead of saying, hey, this person wrote this note that proves her guilt, say, hey, can you look at this one note and make sense of how that data was created? Just something simple like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to say there's a lovely exercise I do with my students when I'm teaching, and I create an image and I give them a disk image, and they go off and they process and they come back. And the amount that come back and go, this is what happened. And you're like, no. I mean, for two reasons. One, this is a fictional thing. And two, that wasn't the way that I created that image. And therefore I know that that's not what happened because I did it a different way. So there's always going to be more than one way. And they need to learn, or I try and teach them at a fairly early stage, that just because what they have seen is that and could be that, phrasing it as a certainty is a very bad idea.
Yeah.
It kind of spins to like our capture the flags that we run, right? Like we put out these images without really context and kind of a brief kind of summary of what happened. We have people taking completely different paths to get to that result, which is kind of wild too, because it kind of shows their investigative, inquisitive mind is saying, this is how we got to it. And seeing people's write-ups afterwards, because people will submit their own little write-ups to how they got to the answers. It's like, this is fantastic. Like, you know, this is how you took this and this is the direction you went. But I mean, like, to your point about the bias, I remember most of the cases that we worked, it's like, here's a crime, here's the suspect, this is what happened, find me evidence. And it's like, you have to take a step back. And I mean, even like, I remember there's one case that I had, it was a USB drive, something ridiculous. Here's a USB drive that's found by a house, someone's house, a suspect's house. Sure enough, you know, the guy had his resume on there, had CSAM and, you know, all that other stuff. But in the end, it's like, if I can't link that to someone else, I mean, there's so many potential holes with that. You have to be able to kind of take a step back. And I think this is where users and kind of examiners always kind of really focus on very definitive things. Like sometimes you just don't know, right? And it's okay to say no, don't know. You could, and I think we always try to please and try to answer that question, where in reality is, you know, it's okay to don't know. You know, I don't know how that timestamp gets created. I tried to test it. I can't figure this out. I don't understand. Talking about making assumptions. It's a very there's several active cases going on that, you know, based on a timestamp. Well, if that timestamp is read in a certain way, or if it's perceived that it's created this way, it's a completely different narrative. So it's the unknown part. I think it's very much, it's okay to not know. I think that's the part that we should probably help junior people to say it's okay.
Yeah. To say you don't know is far better than claiming to know something you don't.
But I'm a woman and I know everything.
Yeah, we're not going to argue that. That's fine.
I am the queen of saying I don't know.
Yeah, it's essential, and you know, it's also I'm going to say it's when you come up against an examiner in an adversarial court scenario, and they are so certain about their correctness that those are the ones I really enjoy taking down.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds terrible,
but at the same time, like, you know, I remember I saw a quote like over the past couple of days that, you know, you don't learn from successes, you learn from failures, right?
yeah.
You know, it's the time that you get raked over the coals in court. That's when you realize saying,
Yeah.
I
Where
should
did we
either
see that? Was that Winston Churchill? Where did we see that? I saw that too. TikTok.
Instagram.
I
I don't
saw that.
know. uh, how about the cloud piece? This came up as well as part of the survey. Transitioning and kind of being open to the cloud, which is actually surprising. Some of the numbers that we saw, I think there was like a 10-point increase from last year to this year of being open to the cloud. And that's not from user perspective. That's like from agency management and head of labs. So it's surprising how much of, you know, people are lining up a little bit or being open to the idea of it. I think all of us still kind of not cringe at it a little bit, but I mean are still cautious about it, because I mean all your case data being stored in the cloud is scary. And then added CSAM stuff as well into that.
Yeah, I think a friend of mine very early on nailed it for me actually, and he just said every time you see cloud in a sentence, replace that with somebody else's computer, and then see how you feel at the end of that, because that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to store all my case data in the cloud. I'm going to store all my case data on somebody else's computer. It sounds it sounds a lot scarier, but actually it means that you understand what the risk is. And I mean, I've done cloud work in the security space for things like patient data and the NHS here, the National Health Service. And it's how do we make sure that that is safe and only accessible to the people? And it's all to do with encryption. And we have moved to the point whereby the technology is, generally speaking, good enough to allow the safe storage of data. I'm still a little bit risk averse as a
Mm-hmm.
person. I'm in that regard, and I prefer a private cloud or a local cloud to store it. I mean, the infrastructure, scalability, and uh, virtualization, and all of those good things still exists, but it's just under a little tighter control.
Do the additional kind of security mechanisms, like, you know, the whether it's FedRAMP, all that stuff in the States, does that sway your view a little bit, that it's, you know, if the agencies and kind of or companies kind of are agreeing and kind of abiding by that and are certified, does that make it easier for you a little bit for
It's made it easier for me to do it professionally, because you go, oh look, Microsoft is accredited to hold NHS data. That's great. Let's use them. From a personal perspective, I still have reservations. I mean, I'm not the person who's ultimately signing off on the risk of these things, so it's not for me to say or to accept that risk, and I wouldn't want to try and sleep at night if it were me with that risk there yet. It's very good. It's very close.
Mhm.
But the thing is that we all know how reliable computers are, and how vulnerabilities come up and they get found. And you just need one. And then somebody has accessed every CSAM case that you have uploaded there. And at that
Yeah.
point, you're like, no, I can't condone it, because it's a low risk, but it's such a high impact.
Mhm.
And for me, that equation just can't work. Now, I'm not against it for lower impact stuff. I think it's a fantastic idea, but to be honest, you probably won't know that it's a lower impact thing until you've examined it, and you won't examine it until you've uploaded it, and then you will find out that it's got something dodgy on there that you want to pull out. And then getting stuff off the internet, getting stuff
Yeah.
out of a cloud isn't as straightforward and as clean as you think it might be or could be.
And
And so
attackers are
for me,
really
I
well
have,
versed too on attacking the
yeah,
cloud, and there are not protection mechanisms, barely any multi-factor authentication set to protect,
yeah.
and logging.
Logging. I mean, again, I've done logging and monitoring configurations for things, and people will never do it well enough. And it kind of doesn't matter, because by the time you're reviewing your logs, it's too late anyway. So you know who's done it, but they've already
Hmm.
got it. That's and given what we're talking about, that's what we want to stop. Is we kind of don't want to know that they've got it afterwards. Well, we do want to know who's got it afterwards if something goes wrong, but we don't want them to get it in the first place. So yeah, I am a Luddite in that regard. Hands up, that's me. I admit to it. But that's because I'm risk averse, and for me, it's not there yet.
I think there's slow steps in that direction, but again, I totally agree with it's the potential impact of some of that stuff is difficult, but it's interesting to see kind of the trend to kind of slowly going up, like 10 points from last year, and that's kind of people being open to it. That's where I find it's
I think it's going to be. I think we're going to see the same with. Well, let's say AI will be the same. We will see it increase, but it's going to be. It's a little bit familiarity breeds contempt because I'm going to say you'll have seen this as well. Just on the front line, before it was like you get a phone, you'd seize a phone, it would go into a bag, it would be handled. They'd want to give it to a techie as soon as humanly possible because, they don't know what they're doing. It's like now everybody's got a smartphone, everybody knows what they're doing. Every phone that gets seized has been tampered with in some way by the guy who seized it because he's decided to take a look for himself and scroll past it, and just to see if there's any evidence on there. And I think what we will see is that because people use the cloud constantly now, we've all got a Gmail account. I remember Gmail being, invitation only. Crikey. I was pretty early adopter on that front. But we all use the cloud. We all use OneDrive. We all use Apple iCloud. It is iCloud, isn't it? I can't remember. Yeah. It just happens automatically. All of these things. We're all so familiar with it. It's just like, oh yeah, it's fine. It works the rest of the time. It'll be no problem. And then we get. I don't know if you're aware, but the UK government has decided to request that. Well, compel Apple. I think it's probably a fairer thing. Compel Apple to turn off strong encryption in the cloud, in the iCloud, which Apple is currently fighting the lawsuit in the UK courts. But it's like people are already there. Their data's already there. They're already using it. They're not going to stop using it because the government's turned off strong encryption. They're just going to carry on because for most people it doesn't matter.
Do you think it's like generational as you like? Because if you think about it, some of the decision makers are they're the younger ones kind of moving up through the ranks too, right? Like that are more, as you said, pretty much everyone's familiar with phones now. I remember when I started, like we just were introducing, laptops and cruisers, right? So it's kind of a new thing. And then all of a sudden, like now the guys on the road have access to everything, GPS, live, search, everything, right? So I think that part too is, the people that are making some of these decisions are probably starting to grow up with technology a little more than the, don't call them dinosaurs, but I mean, it's a different people that were making some of the decisions ahead of time.
Yeah, no, I definitely think you're right. I think that there's a little bit of a disconnect though, because I don't think that it is the tech people who are getting promoted to those roles. I think it's the operational people who are getting promoted to those roles. The sort of the senior level roles. Tech is good. No, hang on. He says, phrasing this really carefully so as not to offend anybody. It's something I have been doing all my life, offending people by opening my mouth and saying what I think instead of what I should be saying.
Story of my life.
I think that the best technical people want to stay technical people. He says, modestly putting himself into this bucket. God, terrible. One of the reasons I stopped doing what I was doing in security work was because I ended up writing reports. I ended up writing risk assessments. I ended up doing lots and lots and lots of paperwork. And I was such a high risk that nobody would ever actually let me touch a computer with security because they were afraid there would be a back door in it because, you get to that point. And then you're like, actually, I really kind of miss. I got into computing because I wanted to play with bloody computers. I didn't get into this because I wanted to write shit tons of paperwork. So you make that change, and I think techies. I think the techie mindset is a lot like that for the good techies, and therefore, they'll stay in the lab. They'll switch careers. They'll go somewhere else where it allows them to play. I don't think they necessarily stick out that promotional career ladder to keep going. I mean, I think you're quite a good example yourself, Paul. Really, aren't you? Because you didn't stay in the police to get to a position of authority. You buggered off to Cellebrite to go and do something interesting. And I think that makes my point quite well.
It's I think with people, just the change in technology and how it's evolved as well. I think that's kind of where it's everywhere now too.
You
right?
either grow with it or you die.
Kind of
In
like
this
with
field, you have to.
AI, right? I think
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're going with it too.
But consumer devices have been made so easy. Fundamentally, you buy your iPhone, it connects to your laptop, you sync your calendars, it all happens. Last time any Apple user ever opened a configuration file was decades ago.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't even know what a P list is, let alone have the capability of editing one.
But forensic software is the same, right? I think if you kind of take a step back, I mean, like, we've kind of created this industry of making things much easier as we go as well, right? To help move cases along quicker, make easier finding some of those deep diving artifacts, to surface them as well. I think we've kind of created this easy examination button as well.
Yeah, I think this is one of the reasons that training is so important. And I know Cellebrite does it, and I teach it at a sort of university level. But training is the thing that says, okay, well, first of all, we've got to drum into people that if they are presenting, they have to know what it is that they're presenting and where it came from and how they got it. Just sticking this thing in front of a jury and going, I found this, is not actually valid forensics.
Well, at least you hold people true to that.
Yeah. And I think when you're I mean, I have done Cellebrite training courses, and I've seen a little bit of how the sausage is made in the terms of what the results that are coming out of it, and I think that's a very important thing. But the trouble is I think that, again, because of the overload, because of the sheer volume, because of all of this, the training requirement is going down for the first responders. They are essentially at the point of plug this into a kiosk, get the data off it, extract something that's of evidential value, and we'll go and arrest the guy. I have no problem with that, but it needs to be escalated to a forensic analyst afterwards to verify and to make sure and to understand. And I think that's the stage we're currently missing. But that's again, this is not a fault with software. This is not a fault with training. This is a fault about staffing, manpower, and money. And that only comes from, it's certainly on the police side, it only comes from governments. And to be honest, on the defense side, unless you have a particularly rich defendant, it comes from governments as well, who are even less willing to pay for opposing their own money.
So speaking of training, there's one of the points I think in our survey about, I think, online versus in person.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'd like to hear this.
I'm just trying to find the exact number on that. Was that 6 out of 10?
I think 6 or 7 out of 10 prefer in person over online. I'm terrible with online training. I cannot pay attention.
Squirrel brain.
Yep. And I know.
For me, it's like, ooh, shiny. I start looking at something else.
And what's hard is now in the US, government is kind of frozen from attending training in person. So they're forced to do it online if they have a budget at all. And then there's, I don't know, it's expensive too. Like, I know SANS is not cheap, but then if you're North America, local law enforcement, you can get 50% off all training. And most people don't know that.
Yeah, right. Well, put that out there. Everybody heard that here first. Actually, a significant number apparently will have heard that here first. So, anyway, yeah, it's interesting actually. I mean, I've got mixed feelings about it personally as an individual, because I don't like going places. No, that sounds terrible.
I like teaching it virtually. Sometimes I can be in my sweatpants and my socks.
Yeah, this is it. Teaching virtual. Although
it's more
I was going to
exhausting.
say, it depends what you're doing, because if you're teaching professionals and they're paying to be there, you can do things like, okay, everybody, I want the cameras on. if you're teaching a class of students of which there's 30 odd, and you've got to abide by various privacy
Yeah.
laws and all sorts of like this, you can't go, all right, everyone, I want the cameras on. So what you end up doing is sitting in teams and staring at a bunch of those little circles with letters in them. Apart from the character students who changed their, one of my years were fantastic because they decided that their theme was going to be frogs. None of the cameras were on, but every single
Was a different
little
frog?
circle was a
That's
different
cute.
frog, and you're like, that's so cool. Very very good year. But you sit there and you talk for an hour, giving an hour's lecture, and there's not a sound.
Yep.
You've got the headphones on, but nothing's happening. They've all got their mics muted. You could be, occasionally you're like, could somebody stick a thumb up if you're there still, please? And a couple of hands go up.
Well,
But,
now when I teach, we do something called hybrid as well. So it's in person and people virtual, and they can unmute themselves. The first time someone unmuted themselves, I jumped out of my skin. I was like, who in the is that you, Jesus? Like, what is happening? Like, I remember looking, what is that? I also had a guy recently who had his camera on all day. So there's a huge confidence monitor in front of me when I'm teaching. I just see
yeah.
him staring at me. It was so weird, but awesome. Like, good for you, guy. You're paying attention.
But
Yeah.
it's hard when you're presenting too, because I mean, even
Yeah.
doing like onboarding stuff, you're like, okay, am I talking to anyone? Is there like,
Yeah.
does anyone even care? Like,
Yeah.
I could be talking about my Ninja Creamy recipes, and at this point, that's just kind of same feedback.
Yeah. I'm going to think one of my issues. I gave the lectures, but again, university regulation specified that it had to be recorded. And I was like, they're not going to. It's a recorded lecture. They're not going to come. They're not going to turn up. They might log in and then go away and do something else. They're going to play it back on double speed. Actually, it's funny because my students, as you can probably hear, I talk reasonably fast.
Same.
And my students told me that they were so glad that the lectures were recorded because they could play me back at half speed and hear what I was saying. But yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, what was the statistic again? 6 out of 10.
Yeah, 6 or 7 out of 10.
I thought it was 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10. I really like. I've really enjoyed going to do on-site training. I've done. I'm going to say again, Lever is the most recent example. I did two in-person courses and 2 online courses, and the online courses were excellent. But like you, I suffered from. Apart from anything else, you sit at the computer and you do it, and the computer is what we use every day. It's not. We have our email, we have our Discord, we have our every other communications thing that we use, plus all of those academic papers we haven't read yet, plus the news and the web browser. And somebody says, I'm also the squirrel brain. I'm terrible. Somebody will say, and you've probably seen me do it. You said Boston Marathon. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to double check what his name was. And so you go off and you Google
What was it? Zarniev?
I don't know. I did discover that the Boston Marathon is the world's oldest annual marathon, though. So.
I think his name was Zarniev. Now I'm going to Google it.
Say, rather nicely, all of the top hits now are actually about the marathon and
instead
not
of the bombing. That's good.
Instead of the bombing. So when I just tried to put it in, it wasn't.
Yeah, Zarniev. How do I remember this crap? Zokar and Tamerlan or Tamerlan.
Yeah,
the relationships you build from the in-person trainings too. I think that's kind of where it's really cool, because it's like you build these bonds. Like I ran into someone from my first computer forensics course from years ago at a conference, and we're like, hey, it's been like how many years, and it's wild. But I mean, it's everyone's kind of starting.
Well, that's what last week at C2C. This guy Rob Freed, who runs a consulting firm in New York City. Rob taught me when I was 23 years old at NW3C BDRA. And now he's like sitting in the audience consuming what I'm putting out. It's so interesting. He posted a picture on LinkedIn.
He will be thrilled. He will be thrilled to have his name mentioned here.
He was a great instructor. I remember learning FAT32 and NTFS from Rob Freed in BDRA.
Oh.
I told him, I was like, I remember how you said it. His analogy was in FAT32, the file system, in each file, it's like Thanksgiving leftovers. You can't just let it overfill and stuff it in. You have to put it into a smaller container that sits beside it and makes the whole thing like, noted. That was 2003, and I still remember that analogy. Food works for me. Food and drinks, analogies of that forever in my mind.
Brilliant. I'm gonna have to start using food analogies in my teaching. I'm gonna.
It helps.
Right. Okay. Amazing. Right. That's gonna. You say squirrel brain often.
Me,
To
there's
imagine
nothing
what.
like slack space and Thanksgiving dinner. It helps.
Oh.
Oh my. See, this ended up being fun. We had
Yeah.
all the conversation, all the things.
All the things. I'm gonna say, I'm very well. I'm not very happy to draw a line under it there because I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I could carry on talking to you guys for hours. And again, I hope you both come back and we speak again on the podcast because it has been great fun. If nothing else, this time next year to find out what the shifts are in the results, because it will be fascinating to see if another 10% goes up in the cloud.
Yep.
And whether people are entirely fed up of AI by that point in time, or whether
Yeah.
they still think it's a good idea. So it is, yeah. I'm going to say that just keep hearing it on repeat is driving me around the bend, if nothing else. It's the reality. We have to live with it. We have to accept it. We have to get on board, or
get left behind.
Or get left behind. That's it. It's quite funny because obviously. The one of the prime examples of AI going horribly wrong in the Terminator movies, and it's Skynet. Skynet is the horrible, overarching thing. That's actually the name, or at least it was the name of the military, the UK military satellite network. And there's a place where I used to work that had a Skynet Avenue because it was part of the thing. And you're like, I'm not so sure I want to be here
Oh my
anymore.
goodness.
This doesn't seem like such a good idea. Anyway, I digress massively. Right, so I will say thank you very much, Heather. Thank you very much, Paul. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. As always, you can find the Forensic Focus podcast on all of the places that Desi remembers and I always forget, which is Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Yeah, it's on the Forensic Focus website. But the point is if you're listening to this already, you've already found it. So me saying this is kind of an irrelevancy, totally superfluous. So I will say again, thank you very much indeed. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we would welcome you back on any time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.